you had a little bit of tension, a situation between the Chinese and the Americans and Canadians, okay? So, in a nutshell, a Chinese ship almost collided with an American destroyer. Here's the clip, okay? And again, this is from In Context, which is my outlet. You should go follow it. And you'll have all these latest clips and news and everything. So here we posted this. So that's the Chinese ship on the left, and and the American one there in the middle. So they're basically cutting them off, right? And take a guess where this is. Take a guess where this took place. Did this take place in the Arctic, or perhaps I don't know, in the Mediterranean Sea? Did it take place off of the coast of Florida, or did it take place in China? Who has the tendency to send warships to provoke to other countries to provoke them? For the life of me, I can't figure it out. So here's the news from this Canadian outlet, Global News, who are on board the Canadian ship, right? And they filmed the clip I just showed you. They said a Chinese warship came within 150 yards. What is a yard? Can you please use the metric system and be civilized? Of hitting American destroyer USS Chung-Hoon during a rare joint Canada-US mission, sailing through the Taiwan Strait. Aha! The latest aggressive military move from Beijing in the South China Sea. So let me get this straight. You're in China, but China's being aggressive to you. Wow. I mean, these people have brains. Their brains are so big, they're on a galactic scale. I'm just a mere peasant. I can't comprehend their political analysis. It's just so developed and refined that I just can't get it. Wow. For your information, Taiwan is China. And this is not even my position. It's an American position as well. America has a one China policy, okay? So even by America's standards, you have to understand this is China. Now, even if you don't agree that, I mean, I don't know what right we would have anyway, but even if you suppose that Taiwan is not part of China, you are sailing on their coast. You're on their turf, okay? You know, if I drive a tank around your block in front of your house, and I keep driving in circles round and round, and I won't leave, or I'll just, you know, I'll leave for a bit and then come back and just I might come in, I don't know, an APC, right? And I just keep sending signals to you that I'm here for some action. Aren't you gonna get the feeling that I'm threatening you? You will. Any person will get the feeling that they're being threatened. So why do you think that sending an American and Canadian warships, to China's coast is not aggressive to China? Are you high or something? Do you have a problem with your brain? What is wrong with you? What kind of journalism is this? What kind of analysis is this? Because they're calling it aggressive, so they are qualifying this. Global News. They are qualifying China's behavior as aggressive. And they're not putting it in quotes. They are saying this. And I can't for the life of me understand this gutter analysis. So they say Global News has been traveling on His Majesty. I almost said her, but apparently we have a king now. So His Majesty's Canadian ship, that's what HMCS stands for, Montreal, the Canadian frigate participating in the mission. The mission to do what? Piss off China? Since May 25th in the South China Sea, and witnessed the near collision from the bridge wing of the ship. So, just in case you don't know, when they say People's Liberation Navy or PLN, it's the Chinese Navy. Or when we say PLA, it's the People Liberations Army. Okay, People's Liberation Army. That's the Chinese armed forces that we're talking about. So a Chinese ship picked up considerable speed and cut in front of the bow of the Changhoon, a maneuver that Montreal's commander, Captain Paul Mountford, called not professional. Yeah, I think it's not professional to sail a warship to China's coast, but okay. For those of you who don't know what a bow is, when we talk about ships, and some of you have maybe always asked yourself, what is port and starboard? Well, here's a simple graphic just to help you. So, port is left, or shall we say west, and then starboard is right or east. And stern would be behind the ship, and bow it would be in front. Okay? Medhurst Navy class is concluded. Courtesy of His Majesty's Royal Navy. So going back to the article, they say when the Chinese vessel altered its course, Mountford called the American ship and told them to move or there would be a collision. The Americans responded by asking the Chinese to stay clear of the ship, but the Changhoon ultimately needed to alter her course and slow down to avoid a crash. Some of you might be a bit confused because Changhoon sounds a bit Chinese, but it's the American ship, just so we're clear. Okay, they don't mention the Chinese, the name of the Chinese ship, but basically all they're saying here is the Canadians warned the Americans. And then this is the Canadian captain saying that the incident was clearly instigated by the Chinese. And then Global News. So this is the people who wrote this. They say they saw Chinese warships shadowing the Canadian vessel on multiple occasions during its transit. What do you expect them to do, man? If you take a Chinese ship to the American coast, you're gonna have jets, ships, maybe even a submarine shadowing that Chinese vessel. Of course. What did you expect? I don't know why they mention this like it's some kind of sign of aggression. You're being aggressive. They say that another Chinese ship sailed within 100 yards. Again, I don't know what this is, man. 100 yards. What is that? Speak metric. Of the Canadian ship, a distance that Mountford believed was safe. Well, thank God the Canadian captain was consulted on the safety of Chinese ships, the Chinese ship's range. So the Chinese told both the Canadians and the Americans, so they radioed the ships basically and told them that they're entering Chinese territory. And then the paper here, they say that despite the joint mission taking place in internationally recognized waters. I find this kind of funny because when it suits us in the West, we start mentioning international laws, and when it suits us, we ignore them, right? So, now they say, oh, well, we have the right to sail here because this is not Chinese territory or their EEA, which is exclusive economic area. When you hear EEA, it basically just means a country's territory in the waters around it. Okay, that's what it means. So, according to the Americans and the Canadians, they're saying we didn't do anything because we're just sailing in international waters. Yeah, okay, but you're still on China's coast. So even by your standards, you should understand perhaps why your presence is a sign of aggression. Now, the Ascendo PACOM, Christ, what a mouthful. This is the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Public Affairs Statement. Basically the American Navy. They said that, well, not Navy, but it's the Pacific Command. The Americans have split up their military in terms of zones. So they have, like as if it's their empire, right? Oh yeah, we have an African command, which they actually do, called AFRICOM, like as if they own it. And then for the Indo-Pacific, which means, every time you hear Indo-Pacific, they're trying to anger the Chinese. That's what it's about. So the Americans say that this ship LY-132 overtook the American ship Changhoon on their port side and then crossed their bow. They maintained course. The Americans maintained course and then slowed to avoid a collision. And again, they say that the Chinese are violating maritime law and they're not respecting international waters. Look, man, it's China. And by your own admission, the State Department, the White House, they all know it's China. You can't start saying, oh, well, these are international waters when it suits you. But in any case, we know the hypocrisy. I'll just play you this clip. This is the Chinese Minister of Defense. And once again, this is on my outlet, on In Context. So go follow on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram. So you get all of these clips from the news. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
我们和很多国家相关的一些国家都制定的有海空相遇的这个规则啊，这些呢也是为了这个在相遇的时候呢，发生不必要的这样的一些危险。但是我要这个反问一下的就是，刚才大家提到的这些问题，为什么它都是发生在中国领空和领海附近，而不是发生在其他国家的领空和领海附近？那就是我们中国的这个军机和军舰，从来都不会到这个其他国家领空和领海附近去做所谓的航行霸权，啊，最好的办法就是我们各国啊管好你自己的军舰，管好你自己的飞机。我们和很多国家。
Well, he pretty much, said it all. I really don't know what to add. Let me just put it in a nutshell for you. There was a gathering where the Chinese defense minister and the American Secretary of Defense, so Lloyd Austin, were both present. And, Austin spoke the day before the Chinese defense minister did. Li Shangfu is his name. And then the next day, he kind of just, he gave him a good walloping with his speech. And I want to be clear. We are talking about warships. This is not a boat. Okay? It's not a canoe. It's a warship. It's made for killing and destroying things. You can talk about defense when your ships are at bay, in your own territory, not shadowing somebody else's coast. When you send warships all the way over there, you are provoking the Chinese. Period. I'm sorry that you don't understand politics. I'm sorry that you're too dumb to grasp international relations and geopolitics. But this is a fact. When you send bombers, nuclear bombers like Trump did, not in Iranian airspace, but certainly next door as a show of force. And then at one point, you remember there was an American drone that actually entered Iranian airspace and they shot it down. And Trump pretended like he was the victim after he violated their airspace. The hell are you doing in Iran? You're the president of the United States. Mind your business and stay in the United States. What are your drones doing in Iran? What are your warships now, Biden? Biden, what are your warships doing on China's coast? Stay at home. Why do they always feel this need to provoke and to cause tension? Why? Just stay at home, man. Mind your business. The thing is that if you want to talk about defense, we can talk about defense when it's on your own shores. Invading Iraq is not defense. Iraq is on the other side of the planet, but we call that defense. Apparently, we had to protect ourselves from made-up weapons. And now we talk about a safe and secure Indo-Pacific. What the hell does that even mean? I'll tell you what it means. My job is to translate politics for you. And the translation of a safe and secure Indo-Pacific, when the U.S. Secretary of Defense says it, is that we are going to provoke China. The United States can barely deal with Russia in Ukraine. You can barely handle the Russians. Why are you trying to start a new war with the Chinese? You see, the Americans, the thing is that the Americans, they are the global hegemon, they are the hyperpower since 1991. But that power is diminishing, okay? That power is artificial. The United States sees China as a contender, as a threat, right, in capitalist terms, because, having a successful economy better than ours, heads will roll. So, at one point or another, I really hope I'm wrong, but at one point or another, I think there's gonna be a war with China, and the Americans will also bring the Australians down with them because Australia's kind of like a lily pad or a jumping point into the Indo-Pacific and China, and they've soured relations between Australia and China. God, it's compared to what it was, it is so bad now. It makes no sense because Australia needs China for trade, but they've managed to provoke the Chinese and sour relations so much. So I think the Chinese, they mind their own business. They're not they're not interested in invading other countries and putting military bases there. So now the only way to start a war with them and bring them down and destroy their economy is to go to their territory. And that's what we're seeing. And AUKUS, this defense pact, I should say offense pact between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States. What a horrible name, AUKUS. I hate saying it, but that's what it is. Couldn't you guys have come up with something better that sounds cooler? Whatever. So that was intended to also provoke the Chinese, because now you have a transfer of technology. You have, we're not talking about nuclear weapons. There are no nuclear weapons, at least not publicly stated, but certainly nuclear powered submarines. So these are submarines that are much, much better than diesel submarines. These submarines, they can stay underwater much longer, provided you can feed the crew and they don't go crazy. And, they are a very, very lethal weapon of war. And they say there won't be any nuclear weapons on board. But it doesn't matter, because the point here is that they're still transferring technology to the Australians. I really wonder if this violates the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The fact that the Americans use Australia, to train their soldiers. American soldiers in Australia, they train in the same bases in some cases as the Australians. It's like it's their own base. They just share it with each other. And now, obviously, that's not uncommon to have armies sharing bases. You've had this, many, many, many times in history. But my point is that they have unprecedented levels of access, to the point it's like they're running the place. Pine Gap, the spy station, is a good example of that. Where it's like, oh, it's a joint venture. The base belongs to both of us, but it's really the Americans who are in charge, and it's in Australian territory. So you take, you understand what I mean. And then of course they have all these aircraft stationed there. God knows, how many boats, submarines, etc. So they're going to bring Australia down with them. And, I don't know what the hell the Canadians are doing here. Do they also want to join in? They want to join in the fun? Because it's not going to be fun. I'd really take the Chinese defense minister's words. And keep in mind, I hadn't even seen this clip until I played it to you. He just happens to be towing a similar line. But my point is that we're talking about politics and balance of power. The Chinese are set to overtake the United States in terms of their economy. They are getting all of these countries on board for their Belt and Road Initiative. And the Chinese are really paving the way for a multipolar world. And so when you are the hyperpower, or so they say, the last thing you want is to lose your power and to have a new world order. Right? No pun intended. You remember Bush, a new world order. I don't know. I prefer quoting Bush's funny moments, but anyway, they don't want that, the Americans, because that means in Washington, their power is diminished. And you have to keep in mind that this doesn't just mean that, where they're going to have, a smaller economy. It means that sanctions don't work anymore. Sanctions are used as a bullying tactic. Sanctions only hurt civilians. You know this. And when the dollar is not as important anymore as it is today, then how can you weaponize it against other countries, right? And then, of course, having a better economy, you have a better military. So the U.S. military might also end up being smaller or dragging behind. Who knows? I'm going to talk about Iran and their hypersonic missile in a second. The United States doesn't have hypersonic missiles. China does. Russia does. Iran does. So, in many domains, the Chinese will overtake. Even in diplomacy, the third one I wanted to say, you saw how China is already today, making peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So it's not the Americans now that people think are, oh, they're the masters of they're the peacemakers and all this Camp David and all this bollocks. Now it's the Chinese. There's somebody else, and they're serious about actually making peace between people and so on. So in all these domains, that's why China poses a so-called threat, so supposedly to the Americans, or shall we say to American hegemony, and they want to get rid of them. And I really hope I'm wrong, but I think at one point it's going to get out of hand, out of control. And it's the same kind of tactic they use in Ukraine and Russia, right? Like they don't actually attack Russia directly, but they do attack Russia through Ukraine. So just like they're using Ukraine against Russia, and then most people who have no clue and they barely have time to even listen to politics, they're just going about their day and they just Russia's the evil one, Russia did this, Russia that, it's Russia and Ukraine. They don't think, oh, this is Russia and NATO, Russia and the United States. They don't even grasp this because we don't have a real press. We don't have a real media that educate people. They just lie. But in any case, that's the same thing they're going to do in China. They're going to use Taiwan against the Chinese. And I want to warn you guys, because this is not a joke. You've had wars that have started just like this. Remember, in Vietnam, like what the hell is the United States doing in Vietnam? The excuse they used was the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which they engineered, right? So, and that was also something that happened at sea, right? So things like this, where you have a collision between a Chinese ship and an American ship, or perhaps they start firing at each other. Who the hell knows? Doesn't matter. These things can lead to huge wars, long wars where many people die. And the Gulf of Tonkin incident doesn't give the Americans a right to do what they did in Vietnam, but they will use it as an excuse, as a pretext. And so you just need a tiny thing to happen, or even something made up for the Americans to seize it, or shall I say the power elites in Washington to seize on that and then create a fiasco, a giant war, and say, oh, we were attacked. We have to send, many troops and so on and so on. They cook up the excuses. Now in Ukraine, of course, they're not sending American troops. They are absolutely sending special forces, and there's a French journalist who literally saw an American running the volunteer thing. I did a video on it, but they do have troops. But my point is, they don't send them in the same quantities as in Vietnam. But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, America is omnipresent in Ukraine since 2014, even, right? And I did this. The point is that they're still using something as a vehicle to attack the Russians, and they might do the same thing with Taiwan. Taiwan is armed by the United States, even though it's the United States. They broke off ties with Taiwan, and because the United States until the 1970s viewed Taiwan as the real China, quote unquote, right? The real Chinese government. And then they said, no, okay, the one in Beijing, that's the real Chinese government. So they broke off ties with Taiwan and then normalized ties with Beijing. And they do say they have a one China policy. So it really doesn't make sense, because the United States says Taiwan is part of China, but then they arm Taiwan. And, they say that China should not encroach on Taiwan or threaten Taiwan. It's their own country, man. It's not a separate country. It's a part of China. It just happens to be, there just happens to be a bit of water in between. It's still China. But the United States, it makes no sense, right? Because they have conflicting positions. Doesn't matter. That doesn't impede or stop their ability to cook up a fiasco and use Taiwan as the vehicle for a war with China. It could be a Cold War, or shall we say indirect, or a hot war, direct war. Who knows? In both cases, terrible for the world, terrible for the people there, but very good for the weapons manufacturers and the power elites in DC.